Hello, Professor. I started to say your name, Partapulua, or I just say Professor Muhammad. I'm Carlos Sanchez. I'm a senior at Gilmer High School, and I'm ready to present this presentation. All right, so, pardon me. The essay prompt is create a policy over something that would change the United States and help it benefit it in a certain way. And I got this policy to where I think to help inflation, I think we should increase the interest rate, so it'll make it harder for people to buy things, but it will also help our economy in a better way. All right, so it's hard to see it. I will upload the slides onto the entry on Google College, or the assignment. But here's the title: Inflation in the United States of America by Carlos Sanchez. Inflation and what it is. Inflation is an economical or financial issue that is not very good for a government to be in. Inflation is primarily caused by an imbalance where too much money is chasing very few goods, leading to the rising of prices. What it affects? It affects groceries, gas, housing, and daily life. Now, this is very important because as an average person, people don't really think about this stuff. They don't really think about economics. They don't really think about money, financial stuff, or anything like that. They're like, hey, if it don't affect me personally, it's not going to affect It's not going to affect me personally. But it does affect everybody, especially the government as a whole. But more importantly, everyone as an individual. Why does inflation matter? Inflation is not something you can just ignore. It's something that needs to be looked at and considered. Inflation matters because it affects everyone within that economy that is suffering under the inflation. Whether it affects you directly, it can affect you indirectly in other ways in your life. Who it affects families, businesses, and overall the economy or any kind of big corporation. Now, as I touched on earlier, it's not something you can ignore. It's something that has to be looked at. It's something that needs to have more awareness to. And obviously the government, it's kind of hard to put a lot of focus onto everything. But you got to split it up into smaller segments and split everything up into whatever else you're doing. So we're going to take an example. Back in 2022, post-COVID, there is an inflation crisis to where inflation just shot up. And the inflation crisis caused prices to rise. It caused really much everything and everybody to be broke. But people were not also broke too. So 2022 inflation was at an all-time high compared to recent years. It was 9.1%. This happened because of a multitude of reasons. One of them being the stimulus checks. This was because Joe Biden, or not just really him, but pretty much the government, was giving everyone all these stimulus checks to help people get on their feet due to the inflation, due to COVID, due to people not working because jobs had to close down. They had to cut people off because they didn't want to have the spread of the pandemic. But this resulted in the government to send stimulus checks, and they kept sending it, which led people to having more money than what they could spend, or more money than usual. So they ended up spending more stuff than they would usually not buy or spend. Companies such as Amazon and FedEx were also affected by this pandemic in a big way. And this big way they got affected was transit and transportation staff. So they had a shortage on people who were transporting goods due to the pandemic, obviously, which caused people to, as I said earlier, they were buying so much goods, but there wasn't so much goods to go around because there wasn't enough people to take them out, and also not enough employees in the factories and making them. Also, the war in Ukraine also caused prices to rise. Anytime energy is attacked, anytime energy is very minimal or at a low balance, it affects everything. Energy is what we run on. Energy is what the world, the government, pretty much everybody uses in their daily life without you knowing. For an example, this light right here is energy. Everything's energy. Laptop, energy. The camera I'm recording on my phone, it's energy. Everything's energy. So when energy goes down or is affected, then we're all affected too. What caused it? Effect 1. This, I did my not heavy research, but I did a fair amount of research on this thing or this effect, and I ended up coming to a conclusion. This is called a demand pull inflation effect. As I said earlier, this issue called inflation has left so many people in a terrible financial situation. But not just the people in general, but the country as a whole. The demand pull inflation is when there is too much demand for a product and not enough product to go around. Same thing I said. Pretty much the same thing I said earlier, but it ties to demand pull inflation. The stimulus checks the government sent out was not very good at the time, but it was good for people at the time for them, but not as a country as a whole. Not for the country as a whole. Cost 2. This is called the cost push inflation. When COVID hit and the economy had to limit the amount of vehicles of transport, this ties to FedEx and Amazon and UPS and whatever other, even DoorDash. Now, DoorDash did succeed, but only because it was not a company running it. It was a company running it, but it was individuals wanting to, go out there and hustle for money. So they couldn't really directly control these people to do Grubhub and stuff like that, or Grubhub and pick up and delivery orders. What companies did, they increased the price in order to be able to cover costs for the price of their goods. So, as I said earlier, the stimulus checks that were given, this is one of the next slides I'll talk about. I kind of want to get a little more beginning of it. So, when people had much more money to spend than what they usually did from the stimulus checks, companies couldn't keep up with the goods. So they ended up rising. Let's take the Sharpie right here. So, this Sharpie right here was, let's say, $2 for one Sharpie. I know it's crazy expensive, but it's an example. So the Sharpie was $2, and people were buying Sharpies like crazy. But there wasn't enough Sharpies to go around. Let's say this company only had one Sharpie. So this Sharpie don't matter. But let's say this company had one Sharpie. Instead of $2, they had to bump it up to $4 because the companies needed to, cover the cost of their goods, and they're by controlling the amount of revenue they're going to get from the product. All right. Cause 3, low interest rates. So the low interest rates was that was the government trying to help people because I'm not getting political. I'm not want to get political or anything, but we're in a democratic state of our country, so they want to help out people. So they lowered the interest rates, and lowering the interest rates allowed people to buy houses they normally wouldn't buy because the interest rates were much lower. Low rates, as I said earlier, made borrowing money easier. And more spending meant higher inflation rates. So that's not good for inflation. But that's just my opinion. That's what I would do my research on, and what kind of policy I created in this, or what policy I would have created if I was in charge of the government in this assignment. But inflation is just something that I was raised into a financial household, so I know a lot about finance, and I even work at a bank. So it's just a fun assignment in my opinion. All right, deeper effect and negatively from the policy. So the policy I made, or I want to, if I was in charge, I would make. It's just very simple. So the government is in charge of what's it called, the monetary, I think it's system, monetary something. I forgot what it's called. Monetary system. So the government is in charge of the monetary system, which controls the amount of money we give to others from the government and the amount of money we take in from taxes. So I think we should increase the interest rate, because when you increase the interest rate, this leads to people not spending or not buying something they would have. So on a $500,000 estate, someone would not buy because the rate was so high. But back then in 2021, 2022, they were much lower than usual, which caused people to go buy it. So I think just raising the interest rate on everything would make it a lot easier on people. And by the way, it's not going to hurt them. It could, but they're saving money rather than spending it. So a smart person would know saving money is a lot better. But this does come with negative effects. And obviously there's pros and cons to everything. But negative effect this could be is increased stress levels among families due to the, your financial quotient, or your financial state as a family as a whole. So this can cause stress. It could raise inequalities. It could make the barriers between middle class, I think it's higher class. I don't even know what it's called. Middle class, high class, and low class. The borders could be separated much more, but also racially too. Reduces purchasing power, which is the best part about it. The solution, as I said earlier, is just a simple, not simple, but it's a policy where I think we could just increase the interest rate. so people will have less spending, and it will help stabilize prices. Conclusion. Inflation is no joke, so please take it serious. Please take it into account into whatever you do. Inflation is something that we can't control by one person, unless you're like super smart or something. You figure something out. But more, just speaking as overall, inflation is a together effort. It's a together thing that we got ourselves into, and even that wasn't even born before the first inflation crisis or whatever. It's so important to talk about. Professor Muhammad, I hope you enjoyed my presentation. I know I enjoyed making it, speaking it. But other than that, you have a great day, Professor. That's it.